Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DriveThruRPG review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at DriveThruRPG.com. With this video, I'll be reviewing the encounter book, Cristo's Compendium of Crimes, designed by Angus Bessai for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy the content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/Rogue Watson. So Cristo is a surly dwarven bounty hunter with some really fun artwork. However, unfortunately makes the cardinal sin of disappearing after the introduction or foreword, which too many books tend to do this. They say, they want to do the Xanathars or the Tashas or whatever and have it be a character actually penning the book, and that character will write the in-universe character, and that character will write an introduction, and then that's it. We don't hear about them again. Well, the trick to doing this is to put little sidebars or little flavor text throughout all of these little whatever it is you're making, whether it's a magic item book or encounter book or an adventure or something. Just have them get that voice through, and unfortunately we don't hear at all from Cristo except for this introduction. I think there's like one sidebar at the very end in an appendix for some weird reason where I was like, oh, maybe they did realize they should have done this at some point. Anyway, this is a encounter book with 20 encounters, obviously based around crime. However, what it really is, it's an urban encounter book specifically. Like, these are all generally encounters that are going to take place in a city. To me, that is the most challenging location to create encounters for, although also maybe also the easiest, because obviously there's gonna be a lot of encounters in the city, right? You're gonna run into all kinds of things happening. But I know as a DM, I often get nervous when my characters are in a populated area or a city, not because they're sociopaths, some of them are, but because there's just a lot of things that can happen. They can, go shopping or do whatever, and there's entire infrastructure and government and consequences, like things, versus just going through a dungeon crawl and doing rooms and traps and monsters. Like, there's a lot of characters you have to come up with. There's a lot of things that can happen. So having some kind of encounter system to break up that action, especially if we're just stopping in to do some rote shopping or picking up supplies or turning in a quest or something, can really help bring a lot of cities alive, even if they don't have to be tied to any particular part of your story. It's just, hey, this is something that's happening in this city. This one does offer a wide range of levels, pretty much tier 1 and tier 2, but some of them could scale for higher. I was particularly impressed with just the amount of variety that is on display here. So we've got some on-foot chase sequences with like almost a parkour built stat block. There's a bust up at a drug den by a bunch of halflings who are posing as like a private school. There's a investigation into a haunted tavern. One of my favorites is definitely it's a murder that takes place in a stables. In fact, it's one of the first ones, I think, the Dark Horse. It's a murder that takes place in a stables, and the players are investigating it, and the killer is one of the horses. The killer is a horse called Dark Horse, who is an awakened horse who also has a spell focus and can cast spells, and is a just contract killer for hire. It's just fucking funny twist. Just seemingly random and weird, and that's the thing that makes it so memorable and unique. And there's even like a druid here, that like lives in the stables, who is like, you'd think is the killer, because it makes sense why the druid would be able to like shapeshift or do something to create that kind of this feels like something you would run into in Baldur's Gate 3, right? Like the killer in the stables is actually the talking horse. And even like, you found it, I gotta get away now, and casts like spider climb and like runs along the walls and tries to escape. And just it's so random and so hilarious. This is just an absolutely fantastic idea. In terms of organizing these locations, encounters, every single one of them is 2 pages long, very, very strictly. You can see I'm flipping through all of them, and I don't think any of them ever actually go beyond 2 pages. Almost like the designer like challenged themselves to try and just limit, even when there's like a stat block or a map involved. Now, not all of them have maps. In fact, only about half of them include maps, and the ones that do include maps, these maps do not have any kind of color, or I guess there's a little bit of detail to them, but not something you would really be able to throw into a virtual tabletop. If you've seen my reviews of some other encounter books, namely the ones by CZRPG, you're not going to get that quality of maps here, unfortunately. But I think the idea of encounters is actually really, really, really good, to where this is worth kind of piercing through the roughness of the lack of color, the lack of maps, and frankly the lack of editing too. So much so that I did put it as one of my cons, is that I think it needs overall editing and some cleanup, maybe. Not to where I was really like, oh man, this should not have been like put to print or anything like that, but just it would have been helpful to have another set of eyes on there, just kind of helping, fix some of the syntax and just the way that sentences flow. And there's a few little minor typos here and there. And I actually do read through, quite a bit of these products that are sent to me, and I really want to give everything a fair shake, and that's something I did notice. And a lot of times I'll see it where it's everybody makes mistakes, we're all human, right? And I really only want to highlight that if I think it's a repeated mistake, to where I think a lack of editing is drags the product down, and I think that is the case here. Not to where I wouldn't necessarily even recommend this product. I don't think it's that bad, but it would just help for the designer in the future to be able to run it by an editor, and just that's honestly a great way to become a better writer. If you read any of my blogs, you will know that, hey, I definitely could use an editor for my blogs, whereas my published work is way better because it's got editors helping work on all that and helping me be a better writer, which hopefully eventually reflects back to me writing on my own as a better writer. Another one I thought was really fun was this all dressed up. What now? Is this one with the cultists? I don't know what they're doing. Yeah. So this is also just kind of a darkly funny idea, although this one's very serious too. There is a bunch of evil cultists who are really just making shit up on their own. Like, one person kind of bragged that they're like, part of this evil cult and they're doing bad things. And this one lady was like, oh, that sounds so cool, and joined up. And then there's a guy who likes the lady who joined up, and like another guy who's just easily convinced and joined up. Like, just kind of this ended up with this crew of people hanging out, and they just have no clue like what they're doing or anything, except they're actually pretty serious about it. They've captured people, and they're fixing to do this like blood sacrifice, but they don't know what's going to happen. And the party can, of course, track them down or just come across them randomly. And there's another great twist in here where one of the captured victims, or soon-to-be victims, is actually a devil. Which kind of a devil is it? A barbed devil in disguise, which is absolutely fantastic twist. So the devil's like trying, excuse me. The devil is trying to crawl in my throat. The devil is trying to like make things happen, and also like bargain, with people for like soul power, and just, you can tell there's really a dark twist here. Now, that being said, there probably should be some content warnings for this product at the very start. There is none that I can tell. I'm not saying don't include like human sacrifice in your product, or one of them had straight up like child endangerment, or in fact, there's 3 in a row right now. So this one has the murder, the sacrificial murder. The bomber has literally like somebody who's, although I guess they're not a terrorist, but it's somebody setting off bombs like around a city, which is fucking something that really happens in real life. And then this one, which is a monster like kidnapping children. These are all major things, and I get that it's, compendium of crime, so crimes are often pretty bad, but yet I think we all have it's such a broad, vague umbrella term, crime. Like, everybody has different thoughts of where they first go when they think of crime. And I do think it would be very helpful in a context for both the DM reading this, as well as for, knowing what you're going to get into with each of these various encounters, is the level of depravity or seriousness, or just various, somebody may just say, I don't want to see children endangered. Like, well, don't run Can I Be Your Mommy? Because it's a story about how this troll woman is kidnapping children. Now, the children are okay, but they're still in danger. Like, it's pretty serious about, and it almost feels like it's the end of a, like a horror movie or a cop movie, where the player's like busting down the door and like seeing like, the table set around with all the empty kids' chairs. And it's nerve-wracking when you see that. You're like, you're going to look at the DM going, where are we going with this, boss? Like, so I think having those kind of content warnings would be very helpful for everybody involved. But also, if anything, give that to the DM, and then the DM can then give those content warnings to the players to make sure they can match each of these encounters to their player group. Because I think they are good encounters. I don't think there's anything that I was like, oh, this is like awful. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not like offended by any of these. And I think there are some legitimately good spaces to explore. And a lot of people, really like true crime stories, for example, but maybe they don't want to explore that in RPG, where like consequences could lead to death and kind of a thing. So it's just something important to keep in mind. especially when you're dealing with a lot of very. One of them is like literally a drug. What is it? It's the Halfling School. It's a school. It's a school that you think is for children, and you bust it up, and it's a bunch of halfling drug dealers, and then that can lead to like a warehouse full of. But it's like a real drug that has like effects on people, and is what's it called, Ox Rocks or something funny. So that's, you got to keep in mind all of these very, very serious issues. Exploding Hearts is like if we took elements. Well, Slot is already kind of the xenomorph thing, right, where they can pop out of the chest. This one, it's happening all over the sewers. Is that kind of like, was it the second Alien versus Predator movie that did that? I'm trying to think of which one ended up being kind of just a rote like slasher horror movie. But my biggest complaint about some of these, I think, is something that happens with a lot of encounters where it's just hard to determine what an encounter really is, because a lot of encounters have really cool ideas, but it's clear that the idea is bigger than the encounter. So they might lead to much bigger, more interesting stories. For example, there's one of them that's a twist on like the Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. In this case, it's called Pale White and the Seven Thralls. And the twist is that you hear about this woman and these dwarves, and the rumors are going around like, oh, is she like a prisoner? Are they keeping her? She doesn't go out during the day or anything. And the twist, which is a interesting one, is that she's actually a vampire, and the dwarves are all her thralls that she's using to guard her place. And that's interesting. The problem is that's more interesting for like a side quest versus a single encounter, because the encounter ends up spoiling everything like right off the bat. Like you end up kind of going in, and immediately once you get in the house, you have to fight a bunch of these dwarves, and you make it to the basement, and like there's the coffin, there she is, like it's in there, and it's over, right? That's the whole thing. So I like this idea, but I think it could have used like a few more steps. But then once you add a few more steps and a few more locations, it no longer becomes an encounter, right? It becomes like a full-on side quest. So I don't know. My advice would be to like, some of these are cool ideas, but maybe save them for like bigger, side quest adventure books that can also happen in an urban setting. And I say urban, but like some of these, like the haunted tavern one, like you could put that tavern on the side of the road, like, anywhere technically. Not all of them are literally in the town. I guess the one that a couple of them are more than others. One of them was the parkour one. I don't remember if I wrote that one down on which one. Oh yeah, it's on page 25. I had to write them down because there's a lot in here. Hey, stop him. Which is somebody who's just a runner for like a criminal gang, and you have to chase this guy, and there's a really cool, fun chase sequence where it goes over different stages of the chase, and different complications happen as they run around the city, and of course has this stat block that lets them do all these bonus, dashes and disengages and things like a rogue would do, basically. In fact, it's probably just like a weak rogue stat block that gets it done. So that one would definitely be during the city, and a lot of these would be, but you could technically make some of them not so much. I do want to point out the one with the dragon, fairy dragon, 21 for the Laugh of a Dragon. This one's a really clever idea where this marketplace plaza area is being terrorized by a fairy dragon who's just kind of in it for shits and giggles, and just kind of doing all these pranks, but really causing some problems against various people's relationships with each other, and animosity and racism and all these things that it's kind of instigating. And then the biggest, craziest thing is there's this one dragonborn kid who plays like he's a T-Rex and chases other kids around. And the fairy dragon, using her polymorph ability, polymorphs the like 8-year-old child into a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And then Johnny the T-Rex then kind of playfully terrorizes the marketplace. That's obviously pretty crazy, because it even says in the text, if the Tyrannosaurus Rex form is reduced to 0, any extra damage is transferred to Johnny, most likely killing the child. Well, this is also something that would be very traumatic for your players to deal with, and clearly they would want to deal with it in some other ways. And I think that's part of the puzzle, is like, oh shit, he turned into a T-Rex, like, but maybe allow somebody to notice there's a fairy dragon flying around in the background, and that's, you have to like contain the T-Rex without killing it, while also getting rid of the concentration of the fairy dragon creating. So a really, really cool idea, but one that you need to have the right context for, because could end up really, really badly for the players. There's one that involves some missing, there's this fantasy basketball thing called, what do they call it, hoop ball or something, and the players are trying to play, but one team hasn't had enough players show up. Turns out they were drugged, and not really kidnapped, but kind of drugged and I guess left somewhere. I guess it's kidnapping, to force that team to forfeit. And the quest is that you're trying to just hunt these people down, find them, and then you just find them and you're done. But I thought the better idea, which is here in the resolution section, which is missing players found, I think. What if it match? I don't know. It's in the encounter fine. I'll do it myself. They can choose to play the match and use the rules outlined in Appendix D. So there's an entire rule section in one of the appendices that includes how to actually play this out. But that would be a way more interesting way to do this encounter than just investigating, find the missing players, is having a couple players like step up, and now we have to be part of this tournament game of fantasy basketball. A really fun idea, I think. There's some really neat ideas here. Some of them maybe bite off a little bit more than they can chew, but I really enjoyed, despite the fact that this product doesn't look, I'll admit this, the product doesn't look nearly as sexy as other encounter books I have reviewed, because they're full of, all these big, gorgeous maps and the way they organize everything at the very start. Like all those CZRPG encounter books are just fabulous for that reason. But I honestly think this one has some really fun encounters, like some really cool ideas that I haven't really seen much before, and just, original ideas, clever ideas. They, go from tier 1 to about tier 2, maybe a few scaling more, but I was actually pleasantly surprised. Reading into it, I didn't know what to expect, but I thought it does a really cool idea. And I think urban encounters are particularly challenging because of just the large amount of variety of things involved. Is it like a sewer excursion? Are you just, investigating a murder? Are you chasing someone through the streets? Is it some kind of sporting match? Is there some altercation? Is it a bar fight? Like, what is going on? All of these things can happen in really any kind of city. And this one kind of says, yeah, all these things can happen, and here's some interesting encounters to go with them. I don't know if there were any particularly where I was like, no, I don't think this works. Some of them are kind of just basic investigations where it's like you go around and talk to people and figure out who done it. But that can also be kind of interesting and a nice little breakup, especially if your character just come back from a really long, dungeon crawl or a big fight or something. You're like, let's just get a chance to have fun and kind of role play a little bit, versus having to do this big kind of, drug den bust up, School of Hard Rocks or something. Also, it includes lots of new stat blocks or modified stat blocks, and then appendices for, as I say, the hoop ball, which is the fantasy basketball, and the dueling, which there's a arcane like wizard duel thing, and you have to basically bring him in alive because he has been cheating as one of the encounters. So you can actually play along with the duel, which is pretty fun. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for Cristo's Compendium of Crimes. Pro, 22-page urban encounters with fun ideas. I just mentioned the biggest pro is that this thing has a lot of encounters, and they're all pretty good. They all got pretty fun, cool ideas, and I enjoyed flipping through and reading all of them and seeing all the different ideas that the designer can come up with that can fit inside of a city. Pro, range of styles and themes, including exciting chases, drug den bust-ups, haunting investigations, and a talking horse assassin. Horse assassin? Pro, over 20 stat blocks and magic items, as well as the appendices at the end. However, it does have some cons. It needs editing and cleanup. Not egregiously so, but enough to make me put it on my con list, where I just think having an editor would greatly benefit this product. Con, it could benefit from content warnings. I do think it's serious enough in this product, particularly to include some. I would like content warnings at the very beginning, and like, hey, here's a laundry list of everything we include, and then at the top of each of the individual encounters, just so a DM can flip through and be like, oh no, children danger, can't do that, and just flip. Or maybe they don't want to read it too. Maybe the DM gets upset about looking at various problems or things that are happen all the time in our own society, and we don't want to deal with them in our RPG. I'm not saying do not include. I'm saying to the designers out there, do not feel like you can't include this stuff. I think RPGs can be a great space to exploring these kind of things with the right group, and everybody's mature enough to handle that. But why not give us some content warnings so that we can keep track of it? Cons, half the encounters lack maps, and all maps lack color. That's something I got to do. I got to kind of ding you for maps, even though I appreciate the designer did actually throw some maps on there. I do find that very helpful, but I will say it's less of a con for an encounter book than it would be for other, full-on adventures and dungeon crawls. Honestly, when I'm looking at encounters, I don't necessarily expect there to be maps. It's great if there are. That's a huge perk. And maybe I'm spoiled because I keep referencing like the CZRPG encounter books that I've reviewed a bunch of and have gorgeous maps. So I don't want to feel like this is a huge negative like it would be for other adventures that take place in dungeon crawls. That being said, a lot of these do involve combat, and it's very helpful, or certain scenes, and it is helpful to have those map in play. And I appreciate the designer did have some maps here, but they're not unfortunately suitable enough to have really in a VTT. Another con is that it needs more Cristo. Why do we not have this guy? He looks hilarious, like Dog the Bounty Hunter, but dwarf mode and very surly. And like, why did he disappear? Like, there's no sidebars with Cristo. There's no little fun, like, comments or anything throughout this entire book. It's a huge, huge disappointment that I think would add a lot to making that book a really fun read. Final verdict, Cristo's Compendium of Crimes is a bit rough around the edges, but offers a wealth of fun original ideas in one of the more challenging areas to create encounters in. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on the channel. And support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brandon, Xenocider, David, Eclectic, Roleplayer, Roll, Christopher, Corey, Big Nut, John F., John L., Scott, Eric, Tyler, Nathan, Camp Crystal Lake, Counselor, Andrew, Dell, The Reldron, Captain Woody 79, Stephanie, Andy, Patrick, Jason, Ishmael, Amit, Lumpy, Spuds, and Gold patrons RPG, Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, Scott, Rufus, Carolyn, Jerry, Thomas, and Glenn. Thank you all very much for your support.